I've been a bartender for over 5 years now, and I've seen all kinds of things, but nothing quite like this. It was a regular Thursday night, and the bar wasn't too busy. Just the usual crowd, people unwinding after work, some couples on dates, a few friends celebrating the end of the week. I was wiping down the counter when a man, probably in his late 30s, walked in. He had a worn-out leather jacket on, his face slightly scruffy, and his eyes looked a bit hollow, like he hadn't been getting much sleep. I've seen that look on a lot of people, especially after a tough week, so I wasn't surprised when he sat down at the bar with a heavy sigh. He ordered a whiskey on the rocks, something I've poured 1,000 times. I mixed the drink, setting the glass in front of him with my usual casual professionalism. But then something strange happened. The man's eyes locked onto the glass, his face going pale as he stared at it for what felt like an eternity. I could feel the tension building, the silence growing heavier. His hand hovered just above the drink, but he didn't touch it. Finally, he whispered, almost to himself, "Who told you to make it like that?" I was caught off guard. I've had customers ask for changes to their drinks before, but this was different. His voice had a tremor in it, like he was about to break down right there. I tried to stay calm, still not understanding what was going on. "You ordered it like that," I said, gesturing to the glass. "Whiskey on the rocks, right?" My tone was a little unsure, but I figured maybe he just had a long day and was misremembering. But when I said that, his expression changed. His eyes widened, and his hand shot out to push the drink away from him. "That's impossible," he muttered under his breath, almost as if he were trying to convince himself. "My brother always ordered it that way." There was a slight pause, and then he looked up at me, his face twisting in grief and disbelief. He died last week." I froze. It wasn't the words that shook me, but the way he said them, like he wasn't sure if he believed it himself. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples as if trying to hold back tears. I wasn't sure what to do. It was like something had snapped in him, and all I could do was watch. I stood there for a moment, feeling awkward and unsure how to respond. The man didn't seem to notice, or maybe he was too lost in his thoughts to care. He was still staring at the whiskey, his fingers twitching, like he wanted to touch it but couldn't bring himself to. I wanted to offer him something, maybe some kind of comfort, but I didn't know how. I've dealt with my share of regulars getting emotional, but this felt different, like I was intruding on something too personal, something I shouldn't be witnessing. His breathing was shallow, and I could almost feel the weight of his grief in the air, heavy and suffocating. After what felt like an eternity, he finally looked up at me again, his voice a little more steady this time, though still tinged with confusion. "My brother always ordered it that way," he repeated, as if trying to explain it to both of us at once. I don't know why, but it's like I can't get away from him. Every time I look at something, anything, it reminds me of him." There was a long pause, and I could see the tension in his shoulders, like he was fighting something inside of himself. "It's like he's still here. I can feel him, but he's gone. He's really gone." I wasn't sure if he was talking to me anymore or just thinking aloud. Either way, the sadness in his voice was overwhelming. I wanted to say something, anything that would ease the tension, but I didn't know how. I've never been good at dealing with grief, especially grief like this, something so raw and unfinished. I tried to clear my throat and offer him a new drink, but he waved it away, his hand shaking as he did. The way his eyes kept flicking back to the glass, the one I'd made for him, it was like he was caught between worlds. One where his brother was still alive and one where he wasn't. I couldn't help but feel like I was standing on the edge of something far bigger than I was capable of understanding. He eventually stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor, snapping me out of my thoughts. For a moment I thought he was going to leave, but instead he just stood there, looking at me with a strange, almost pleading expression. "You don't get it, do you?" he said, quietly. "My brother always drank it that way. Always. He used to come in here, sit at that same spot by the window and order whiskey on the rocks, and I always knew what he wanted. But now I can't get it right." His words were coming out faster now, like he couldn't stop himself. "It's like he's haunting me even after everything. Even after he's gone." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to reassure him, but there was something about his tone, the way he spoke, that made me uneasy. I could see his fingers gripping the edge of the table now, his knuckles white. His gaze was distant, but I could tell he wasn't seeing me anymore. It was like he was talking to someone who wasn't there, someone who had been there just a few days ago and now wasn't. He sat back down, still staring at the drink as if it was a portal to something darker, something he couldn't escape. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, but I couldn't move. Something in his voice, the way he said after he's gone, chilled me to the bone. The silence stretched between us like a thin thread ready to snap. I glanced over at the bar's window, the dim light casting shadows across the tables. It wasn't busy tonight, just a few regulars here and there, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, something I couldn't see but could feel in the air. Maybe it was the weight of the man's grief, or maybe it was the strange, unnerving way he kept glancing over his shoulder like he was waiting for something to appear. He whispered again, barely audible this time. I didn't even get to say goodbye. And that's when I felt it, this horrible, suffocating presence, like we weren't alone in the room anymore. At that moment I realized I was holding my breath. The room seemed colder somehow, though the bar's usual warmth hadn't changed. I took a slow step forward, but stopped myself before I reached him. He was staring at the whiskey again, still not looking at me. I almost wanted to apologize for not saying something more, anything to ease the tension. But when I glanced down at the glass, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. The ice was beginning to melt faster than usual, not just from the heat of the room, but in a way that didn't make sense. It was like the glass was sweating, not normal. There was something wrong with the drink itself, something that gave me an unsettling feeling in my stomach. I had been working as a bartender for a long time, but I'd never had a moment like this. I thought about the man's brother, the one he said had died just last week. A part of me wondered if he was just going through a phase of grief, but another part of me couldn't ignore the strange, tangible weight of the situation. I stepped back slightly, unsure of how to proceed. I glanced at the other patrons, but none of them were paying attention. It was like we were in a world of our own, with only the two of us existing in this eerie moment. Then out of nowhere, the man suddenly stood up, knocking the chair over with a loud scrape. "I told you not to make it like that," he shouted, his voice shaking with frustration and fear. And that's when I noticed. His eyes were different. It wasn't just sadness anymore. There was something far darker in them. I stepped back, instinctively putting more distance between us. His voice cracked as he spoke again, but this time, it wasn't directed at me. "He's watching me, isn't he?" The words felt cold, as though they weren't meant for anyone to hear but him. I wasn't sure if he meant his brother or something else entirely. The man's hands were trembling now, and his fingers twitched toward the drink again, but he stopped himself, as if some invisible force was holding him back. It was surreal. I wasn't sure if I should intervene or just let him go. He was clearly distressed, but the atmosphere was heavy, almost suffocating. I wasn't prepared for this kind of encounter. At that point, I didn't know what to do. I glanced down at the drink again, the whiskey shimmering under the dim bar lights. It was so normal, too normal, but something about it felt out of place, like it didn't belong there. I had a sudden thought. What if he wasn't just mourning his brother, but something far more sinister had happened? A cold shiver ran down my spine, and I started feeling paranoid. I hadn't noticed anyone else paying attention, but it was hard to shake the feeling that the entire bar had become a stage, and we were both acting out a scene. Then, as if on cue, the man suddenly started muttering, barely audible. "He's not really gone. He's still here. He's always here." His voice trailed off as he sank into the chair, visibly drained. I stood there, unsure if I should say something to him or just leave him alone. I took a step back, my mind racing. The atmosphere around me felt thick, like the air had been squeezed out of the room. I noticed the bartender, a young guy, probably, around my age, had been watching the entire interaction from the corner of his eye. His face was a mixture of confusion and concern, but he didn't say anything. I wasn't sure if he'd seen what I had seen. I glanced around, and for the first time I realized the whole bar seemed to be quieter than usual. The noise of clinking glasses and casual conversations was absent, and it felt like the whole place was holding its breath. Just as I was about to ask the man if he needed help, he suddenly snapped his head up and locked eyes with me. "You don't understand," he whispered urgently. His eyes were wide and panicked, like he was seeing something just beyond my line of sight. "You're not supposed to be here. You shouldn't have seen this. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I felt a cold chill sweep over me and I realized I couldn't look away. His eyes were full of something I couldn't explain. Guilt, fear, and something darker. He quickly grabbed his jacket, stood up, and, without saying another word, he rushed out the door. I stood there, frozen for a moment, staring at the door through which the man had just disappeared. The quiet of the bar seemed even more oppressive now, and I could hear my own heartbeat drumming in my ears. The bartender who'd been eyeing the whole situation finally broke the silence. He was wiping down a glass but seemed lost in thought, like he had no idea how to process what had just happened either. "I don't know, man," he said, quietly. "People get weird sometimes, but that guy, I've never seen someone react like that to a drink. It's like he was seeing ghosts." I wasn't sure if I agreed with him, but I didn't know what else to say. It was as if the entire encounter had cracked open something I couldn't close. The man's words kept echoing in my mind, especially the part about his brother. Why did he react so violently to a drink that was nothing out of the ordinary? A drink I'd served countless times before without any issue. The thought kept gnawing at me, but I brushed it off. Maybe he was just grieving, maybe it was just too much for him to handle. I tried to shake off the weirdness and focus on my shift, but something about it kept lingering. My mind kept returning to the moment when he looked at that drink like it was poison. His face pale and eyes wide with terror. It wasn't normal, and I couldn't stop wondering what it all meant. I finished my shift without incident, but the moment I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about that man, his brother, and the drink. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the encounter over and over in my head. At one point, I even convinced myself that I had somehow misheard him. Maybe he didn't say what I thought he said, but I knew deep down that wasn't the case. Everything about that moment was too vivid, too real. The way his hands trembled when he pushed the glass away. The way he whispered the words that sent a chill down my spine. "That's impossible. My brother always ordered it that way." I could almost feel the weight of that sentence hanging in the air. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about that strange encounter at the bar. I even found myself looking over my shoulder whenever I passed by the corner where that man had sat. It felt like something was off, like I had unwittingly stepped into a story that wasn't meant for me. I didn't want to believe it, but a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something supernatural was involved. Then, 3 days later, something happened that made everything fall into place. I was working the evening shift again, and the bar was quieter than usual. It was around 11 p.m. when the man walked in again. He looked different this time. His face was drawn, his eyes hollow as if he hadn't slept in days. He approached the bar slowly, avoiding eye contact, and sat down at the same spot where he'd been before. I walked over, my heart racing. I didn't know whether to acknowledge him or pretend nothing had happened, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was somehow responsible for the eerie tension hanging in the air. I asked hesitantly, "The usual, right?" He didn't respond at first, just stared at the glass I'd already started filling with whiskey. The silence between us felt heavier this time, as if the air itself was pressing down on my shoulders. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't think I'd come back here, but I had to see if you'd remember. If you'd remember him." His gaze flicked briefly to the drink in front of him, and then his eyes locked with mine. "I told you that my brother died last week, didn't I? He's the one who always ordered it this way, just like you made it last time." I nodded, confused, my mind still trying to make sense of it. He reached out, but instead of taking the drink, he pressed his hand down flat on the bar, his fingers trembling. He stared at the drink as if waiting for anything to happen. I was about to ask if he was all right when his eyes went wide in sudden recognition, and he shot up from the stool with a gasp, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Don't!" he shouted. It's not supposed to be here." I froze, looking at the glass in front of him. I saw it then, clear as day. A tiny hairline crack ran down the side of the glass, but that wasn't the most unsettling part. There, at the bottom of the drink, just barely visible in the dim lighting, was something that shouldn't have been there at all. A faint, twisted reflection of the man, but not just him. Standing behind him, in the reflection, was someone who looked like his brother, the dead one. Before I could say anything, the man turned and bolted out of the bar, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. I stood frozen, staring at the glass. My mind raced. I knew what I had to do next. I turned and walked to the back, hoping to find some kind of explanation in the kitchen or storage room. But when I came back, the glass was gone. The bar was empty again, like the man had never been there at all. I didn't work the next night, or the night after that. I needed a break. But here's the thing I can't stop thinking about. I've been getting strange phone calls every night. They never leave messages, but the caller ID is always the same, the bar's number. And last night, I heard a voice on the other end, barely audible, a whisper that said he's still waiting for his drink. My name's Jake, and this happened last summer, back when I was still dumb enough to think dive bars were just cheap fun. I was 23, working a dead-end IT job, and Fridays meant blowing off steam with my buddies at the Rusty Nail, this grimy spot near the train tracks. The place reeked of stale beer and sweat, the floors sticky under my sneakers, but the pitchers were dirt cheap, and the crowd was always rowdy in that harmless drunk uncle way. That night, I'd just slammed my third beer when my bladder begged for mercy. I stumbled to the bathroom, dodging a guy arm wrestling over a shot of tequila, and pushed into the single-stall restroom. The second I locked the door, I saw it, scratched into the foggy mirror above the sink, like someone had dug a key into the glass. Don't drink what she gives you. Paragraph 2. I laughed, actually laughed, wiping the mirror with my sleeve, thinking some frat bro had pulled a prank. The letters were jagged, rushed, like they'd been written in panic. Weird, but whatever. I pissed, splashed water on my face, and didn't even mention it when I got back to our table. Then she walked in, tall, in a red dress that looked too classy for the nail, black hair curled tight like some 1940s pinup. My friend Dom elbowed me, grinning, but I was stuck on her eyes. Dark brown, almost black, but they glinted, like a cat's in headlights. She slid onto the stool next to me, ordered 2 whiskeys, and pushed one toward me. "You look like a man who needs a real drink," she said. Her voice was sweet, syrupy, but her nails tapped the glass in a rhythm that made my neck prickle. I forced a smile and nudged the whiskey back. "Thanks, but I'm good with beer." Her grin didn't drop. That was the first red flag. Most people would shrug or tease you for turning down free booze, but she just stared, like I'd flipped a switch. The music, some screechy metal cover of a pop song, suddenly felt too loud, and the air got heavier, like the bar's usual. Sweat and fryer oil stink had thickened into something chemical. Her fingers stopped tapping. "Suit yourself," she said, but her voice had no lift to it now. Flat, robotic. She knocked back her drink in one go, eyes locked on me the whole time, then slid off the stool without another word. Dom whistled low. "Dude, what the hell was that?" I shook my head, watching her weave through the crowd toward the back hall, the one with the bathrooms and the emergency exit. Paragraph 4. An hour later, I was drunk enough to forget about her, laughing at Dom's terrible karaoke attempt when some guy staggered out of the same hallway she disappeared down. He was pale, swaying like a zombie, one hand clutching his stomach. A bouncer grabbed him before he face-planted into the dartboard, and the guy just mumbled, told you not to," before puking all over his own shoes. The bouncer hauled him outside, and the bar erupted into grossed-out cheers. But my stomach dropped. That guy had come from the bathroom, the mirror. I bolted up, ignoring Dom's "Where you going, man?" and shoved my way back to the restroom. The stall was empty, the sink still dripping, but the message on the mirror, gone. Not wiped away, gone. Like the glass had been replaced. The rest of the night blurred into a nervous haze. I kept scanning the crowd for the woman in red, but she'd vanished. Even Dom noticed something was off. "You look like you've seen a ghost, man." But I just shrugged it off. Maybe I was overreacting. The guy who got sick? Probably just some lightweight who couldn't handle his liquor. Still, as we left around 2 a.m., I couldn't shake the image of those jagged words in the mirror. The parking lot was eerily quiet, the streetlights flickering like faulty strobes. That's when I saw her again. Across the street, under the awning of a closed pawn shop, she stood perfectly still, face half lit by a neon sign. Not smoking, not texting, just watching. And when our eyes met, she smiled. Not the syrupy sweet grin from earlier. This was something else. Predatory, like she'd already won. Paragraph 6. I practically dragged Dom to his car, making up some excuse about food poisoning. He laughed, but I could tell he was weirded out. "Dude, you're acting sketched," he said as I fumbled with my seatbelt. I didn't tell him about the woman, didn't mention the mirror, just stared at my phone the whole ride home, jumping at every shadow outside the window. When I finally crashed into bed, my head was spinning, not from booze but from the wrongness of it all. I dreamt of scratched glass and whiskey that smelled like bleach, woke up at noon to a barrage of texts. The last one made my blood freeze. "Yo, you hear about that guy at the nail last night? They found him behind the dumpster, OD'd on something. Cops think it was spiked." I called Dom immediately, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped my phone. "Was it the guy who got sick?" I blurted out before he could even say hello. There was a long pause. "How the hell did you know?" he asked, voice low. My throat went dry. I told him everything. The mirror, the woman, the way she'd looked at me like I was prey. Another silence. Then, "Jesus, Jake. The cops said the guy had enough GHB in his system to knock out a horse. They're checking the bar's cameras." I hung up and just sat there, staring at my own reflection in the bathroom mirror. For a second, I swear I saw those words flicker across the glass again. "Don't drink what she gives you." But when I blinked, it was gone. Paragraph 8. I spent the next week obsessively checking the news, but there were no updates, no arrests, no suspects. The cops wrote it off as a bad batch of drugs, case closed. But I knew better. I went back to the Rusty Nail exactly once during broad daylight and asked the bartender about the woman in red. He frowned. "Lot of people come through here, kid." I described her in detail. The vintage dress, the two perfect curls, the way her nails had tapped that glass like a countdown. His face went slack. "Oh, her." He wiped down the counter, avoiding my eyes. "She's been coming in for years. Always alone. Always leaves with someone. Never the same guy twice." He wouldn't say more after that, just shoved a beer at me and walked away. A month later, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, all I heard was breathing. Slow, deliberate, like someone savoring the moment. Then a woman's voice, barely above a whisper. "You were smarter than the others." The line went dead. I nearly threw my phone across the room. That night I dug through every local news archive I could find, searching for similar cases. And that's when I found them. Reports going back decades. Men found unconscious in alleys near bars. Some with memory loss, a few never waking up at all. Always a dive bar, always a dark-haired woman, always a drink they couldn't remember accepting. The details varied just enough that no one connected them. Except, for one thing, in 3 of the cases, witnesses mentioned something scrawled on a bathroom mirror. None of them could recall the exact words. Paragraph 10. I never went back to the Rusty Nail. Dom thinks I'm paranoid, but he didn't see what I saw. Sometimes, when I'm in a crowded place, I'll catch a glimpse of red in the corner of my eye. A dress, a scarf, and my heart stops. I've started warning guys at bars when I see them talking to strangers, slipping them the same advice that saved me. Don't drink what she gives you. Most laugh it off. A few have gotten angry. But last week, a kid with wide eyes grabbed my arm and said, "Dude, I saw that too. In the mirror at the Blue Lantern." He wouldn't say more, just took off. I think about him a lot. I hope he listened. Years have passed and I still don't know who or what she was. A serial killer? Something else? The cops never found her, even after I filed a report with everything I knew. The bartender at the Rusty Nail quit suddenly, and the new staff acted like they'd never heard of a woman in red. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined the whole thing, until I talk to someone else who's seen the warning. There's a pattern now. Dive bars near train tracks. Always a flickering neon sign outside. Always a single-stall bathroom where the lock sticks. The message appears when she's there, like a warning bell. But here's the thing that haunts me most. The words are always scratched into the glass. No pen, no marker. Like something clawed. There. Paragraph 12. These days I don't drink in bars anymore. But if you're ever in a place like the Rusty Nail, and you feel that prickle on your neck, like you're being hunted, go to the bathroom, check the mirror, and if you see those words, don't just walk away. Run. Because she's still out there, and she's patient. The last guy who messaged me about her, he said the warning wasn't in the mirror this time. It was whispered to him by some drunk old man in the stall. By the time he turned around, the guy was gone. And standing at the bar, a woman in a red dress swirling a glass of whiskey, smiling like she already knew his name. It was one of those slow, rainy Tuesday nights at the Hollow Oak, the kind where the regulars trickle out early, and you're left wiping down the same sticky spot on the bar for the 10th time just to kill the last hour. I was alone, like usual, since my coworker Jake had called out with food poisoning, red hungover. The neon open sign buzzed like an angry wasp as I flipped it off, the sudden silence making my ears ring. I was counting the register when I heard it. 3 sharp knocks on the duo front door. Way too late for anyone sober to be looking for a drink. Through the rain-streaked glass, I saw him. A guy in a soaked trench coat, his hair plastered to his forehead, eyes wide like he'd just sprinted through a nightmare. "Sorry, man, we're closed," I called, not moving from behind the counter. But he knocked again, harder, his voice cutting through the glass. "Please, I left my phone in here, just let me grab it." Something about the way he said it made my skin prickle. Too calm, too rehearsed. Against my gut, I unlocked the door. The second he stepped inside, the air turned thick, like the whole room had taken a breath and held it. He didn't look around for a phone. He just stood there, rainwater pooling at his feet, staring at me with this smile. Not friendly, not even human. Then he said it. I was never looking for my phone. My hand shot under the bar for the bat I kept taped there. But when I looked up, he was gone. The door swung open, rain gusting in. No footsteps. No trace. Just the smell of wet earth and something metallic like old blood. I stood frozen for what felt like minutes, my fingers still curled around the bat's grip. The bar was dead silent except for the drip-drip of rainwater from where he'd been standing. My brain kept replaying his words. I was never looking for my phone, like a glitch in a bad recording. Swallowing hard, I edged toward the door and peered outside. The street was empty, no running footsteps, no shadowy figure disappearing into the alley, just the orange glow of the streetlights reflecting off the wet pavement. I locked the door again, this time double-checking the bolt. My hands were shaking. That's when I noticed it. A single, crumpled dollar bill on the bar, right where the man had been leaning. I hadn't put it there. I picked it up, and the paper felt wrong, too thick, almost leathery. Unfolding it, my stomach dropped. Scribbled in smudged red ink, or was it ink, were 3 words. Check the basement. We didn't have a basement. At least not one customers knew about. The Hollow Oak's real basement was a claustrophobic storage hole behind the kitchen, accessible only through a rusted hatch in the floor. I'd only been down there once when the owner showed me where to stash extra kegs. It reeked of mildew and something sharper like ammonia. And now, somehow, this stranger knew about it. Logic told me to call the cops, or at least Jake, even if he was useless. But something about that note hooked into me, like a fishhook. Check the basement. The words pulsed in my head, louder than my own heartbeat. Before I could second-guess myself, I was behind the kitchen, staring at the hatch. The padlock was still in place, but the metal felt ice-cold under my fingers, like it had been sitting in a freezer. I fumbled with the keys, my breath coming too fast, and finally yanked the hatch open. A gust of stale, sour air hit me, carrying a scent I couldn't place. Not rot, not mold, but something alive, like wet, fur and old pennies. The pull-down ladder creaked under my weight as I descended, phone flashlight cutting through the gloom. The basement looked the same as I remembered. Stacks of kegs, broken stools, a tarp draped over. Wait, the tarp wasn't there before. It was lumpy, sagging in the middle like something was underneath. I grabbed a nearby broom and prodded it. Thud. Solid. Then the tarp moved. Not a rat scuttling. A slow, deliberate shift, like something stretching. I stumbled back, my light, catching the edge of the tarp as it slid off, revealing a shape too long to be human, limbs bent at all the wrong angles. And then it turned toward me. The beam of my flashlight trembled as it illuminated the thing's face, if you could call it that. No eyes, just deep black pits. Its mouth was a jagged slit stretching too wide, like its skin had been torn open and left to heal wrong. It didn't lunge at me. It didn't hiss or growl. It just tilted its head, as if curious. Then, in a voice that wasn't a voice, More like the sound of static and breaking glass. It whispered, "You let him in." My blood turned to ice. The man at the door, the fake phone. This thing knew. Before I could scream, the hatch above me slammed shut, plunging me into total darkness. I don't remember climbing back up. I just remember my nails splintering against the hatch, my throat raw from shouting. When it finally gave way, I fell onto the kitchen floor, gasping. The basement was silent again. No tarp, no creature. Just my own ragged breathing. I bolted out the back door, not even bothering to lock up. The rain had stopped, but the air still felt heavy, charged. Halfway down the alley, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have looked." Attached was a photo. Grainy, dark. Me standing behind the bar. From tonight. But in the reflection of the mirror behind me, the man in the trench coat wasn't smiling anymore. His mouth was open, wider than possible. And inside, nothing but black. I ran until my lungs burned, not stopping until I reached my apartment 3 blocks away. Slamming the door behind me, I deadbolted it, then pushed my couch against the entrance like that would make a difference. My hands shook as I poured a whiskey, downing it in one gulp. The photo on my phone was gone, deleted, as if it never existed, but the text remained. "You shouldn't have looked." I wanted to believe it was a prank, some sick joke from Jake, or a regular with too much time and a twisted sense of humor. But the thing in the basement, that wasn't CGI. That wasn't human. I kept seeing its hollow face in the dark every time I blinked. I called Jake first, then the owner, making up some excuse about a break-in. Neither picked up. At 3:17 a.m., my buzzer rang. Not the sharp press and hold of a delivery guy. Just one long, unbroken drone. I didn't move. The buzzing stopped. Then my landline rang. Who even has a landline anymore? I let it go to voicemail. A distorted voice whispered, "You left the back door open." My stomach dropped. I had left it open in my panic. The call disconnected. Outside, a shadow passed by my peephole. Too tall, too still. Then, knocking. Not on the door, on the window, from the 4th floor. I grabbed my keys, my bat, and bolted for the fire escape, not daring to look back. The metal stairs groaned under my weight as I climbed up instead of down, instinct screaming that the streets weren't safe. Wind whipped at my clothes as I reached the roof, my pulse roaring in my ears. The city lights stretched out below, suddenly feeling miles away. Then I heard it, a wet, clicking sound, like bones snapping back into place. Behind me, the rooftop access door creaked open. No footsteps, just the smell of rain and that same metallic stench. I turned slowly. The man from the bar stood there, his trench coat flapping in the wind. Except now, his smile was gone. His jaw unhinged, peeling open like a broken puppet's. And inside, nothing but that. Same endless black. I don't remember jumping. I don't remember landing. Just waking up in the hospital 2 days later. Cops saying I was lucky. The awning broke my fall. They asked why I'd run, why I'd left the bar unlocked. I didn't tell them about the man, the basement, the thing wearing his skin. Because here's the worst part. When I got discharged, my phone buzzed again. A new text. This time, a photo of my empty hospital room, taken from inside the closet. And one sentence, "You'll look." Next time.